If you want to start your podcast or you want to start inviting guests to your podcast, but you're not quite sure how to do it, maybe you need to think through the path that you're going to take your guests through to make it much more clear. So in this video, I am going to walk you through the exact workflow from start to finish on how to plan your guest podcast. So for the majority of this video, we're going to be in a system called Miro. I love Miro because it gives me a chance to map out my workflows. Any type of flow chart that I have in my brain, I can just go to Miro and design it through colors, shapes, lines, all those things. You're going to see it in just a second. So if you're ready, let's jump into it. Here is the beginning stages of your podcast workflow. I'm going to zoom in, but I just want you to see from this glance, there are two different processes that we're mapping out here. The first one is for guests who reach out to you. When people reach out to you, whether it's through a text, a DM, or an email, you should have a process to take them through a vetting process and have them on your podcast. The other side of this flow chart is for people you have researched and you're inviting them to the podcast. You don't know if they want to be on your podcast or not, but you have to have a process in order to capture those as well. So let's go ahead and zoom in so we can get a little bit more detail. We're going to start with the folks who are requesting to be on your podcast, whether it's through text, DM, or email. So it's important for you to map out, how can a guest reach out to me? They may have a text message. You may have they may have your number, but if that's not a way for you to actually seamlessly put them into your funnel, then perhaps you just want to focus on email only. But if you focus on Instagram only or LinkedIn, for example, whatever your methods of starting that conversation are, you would want to put them here. And then when you set up your automation, which is down the line, you can be very clear on what keyword or what triggers do you need to put in place in order to start the invitation process. The next step in the process is to invite the potential guests to complete the interest survey. So what the interest survey essentially does, it allows you to vet this person. So they're excited to be on your podcast, but does that mean they're a great fit? No. So what you're going to do is send them the guest appearance questionnaire, which has its own set of questions based on your criteria, but it allows you to get to know if they align with your goals. If they are not a good fit, you're going to quickly send them a thank you, but no thank you type of email. It basically says thank you for your interest. However, that we're looking for this specific type of guest, as opposed to telling them we're not looking for you. We're telling them who we're looking for, and hopefully they can self-select and determine, oh, I don't fit that profile. Now, if they are a good fit, we send them an invitation to be on the podcast. So this all happens in the background of your system. But if you decide that they're a great fit, you click a button, they will be marked as a good fit or a potential guest for your podcast, and the invitation to your podcast will be sent out. After that step is when both sides start to merge. So what we're going to do is go through the entire process, and then we'll talk about the differences between what I call a podcast guest versus a special guest. So after you have aligned with the guests, you said that they are a great fit for your podcast. You now want to have a designated interview calendar to invite folks, to allow them to select a time to be on your calendar. There's nothing worse than you trying to play cat and mouse with a potential guest and trying to lock down a time that works for them. If you just send them a calendar link after they said they'd be on your podcast and allow them to book a time that works, they can now own the interview slot. And if they need to reschedule or cancel, they can also do that as well. So with this step, you want to make sure that you have a form that asks them specific questions depending on where they came from, whether they're a guest or a special guest. But this is going to start the interview reminder workflow, which basically says, okay, I've invited them to the podcast, but if they don't open the email, and even if they open the email, if they don't book, we remind them at least 3 times before we say, thank you so much for your interest. Maybe you're busy. We'll come back around. This allows you not to worry about you having a manual follow-up process. You literally bake it into your automation and then you set it and forget it. Now let's jump down to your interview. So the workflow that I have here is set up for a virtual interview, but this could very well be an in-person interview. As you can see, if it is in person, this pink, it kind of refers to sending them location details, parking details, anything that they need to send you in order to prepare for the day of the interview. Perhaps you need to send them a code, a gate code to get into your facility. All that stuff should be in your communication before the interview happens. And the same thing goes for your virtual interview. Then you want to start your nurture workflow. The nurture workflow basically says, thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast, and you start to keep that relationship going. So you might want to send a checking in on you email or text before or after the episode launches. You may also want to send a email or text message asking for referrals. So if they had a good time, you can ask them, hey, if you had a good time on this podcast, or if you feel like there's someone else who could share a valuable story for my audience, please refer them by clicking this link. And all that stuff can be standardized in your communication sequence. So as you can see, the next step here says internal admin notifications. Whether you're doing this with a team or you're doing this by yourself, these steps are going to apply. So if you're doing this alone, then you kind of want to have a checklist to make sure you've gone through this process on your own. But if you have a team, it makes it so much easier when it comes to automation to manage the process so that you don't have to manually follow up with your teammate on when the edits are completed, what part of the edit process are they in, or when have they completed the edit. So if you have your internal notifications already set up, then once you get a team member, you can basically plug them into the system and start to track these phases. So we're going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see the different phases. But it goes from the moment your episode has been recorded all the way to the moment your episode has been released. Up until that point, your team members may only be involved in the part where you research the guest. Everything else might just be click and point, you evaluating. Or you may even have your team involved in the vetting process. But when it comes to you actually recording the podcast, you should be able to set it and forget it based on these steps here. So first, once you complete the recording, whether it's in person or online, you want to upload the raw file to whether Dropbox or Google Workspace, wherever you store your raw files, that's where you want to upload it. That should trigger a signal to your team member to let them know, hey, the raw file has been submitted. Go ahead and begin editing the podcast. Just like in tools like Trello or any Kanban view, if you're not familiar with the Kanban view, then I'll put a reference below so you can understand what does that mean. If you look at Trello, for example, the status of the podcast will be underneath this uploaded raw file stage. Once it is ready to be edited, your team member or yourself will drag that podcast to the next stage, which is started editing. This triggers another set of notifications to let you know, okay, my team member is starting to work on the episode. I don't have to text them or remind them because the system is already doing that. So we're going to move over to the next stage, which is edit completed. So after going through multiple different rounds of review, or maybe this is your first round of review and they've said edit is completed, this now gives you a notification to go in and review their work. You can go through this stage multiple times. You can complete the edit, and then if you send it back for reviews, move it back to started editing. And that process continues until you've approved the video. Once it's approved, then it's moved over to the SEO research stage. This is important because in 2025, people are searching specifically for what they need. So if your podcast is not titled correctly, or if your description doesn't have information that's relevant to a new listener, then it'll be hard to capture cold audiences. Now, when it comes to warm and hot audiences, they know who you are. They're already looking for you. SEO research is mainly to capture people who are not aware of who you are, and they may stumble upon you just because of what they're searching. The next stage in the process is to distribute your podcast to all platforms. Now, you might think this is funny, but once you get into production, it's easy to lose track of your recordings, especially if you're into batch recording. For me personally, I actually have gone through a full year and not release the podcast episode because it just fell through the cracks. So for me, it's helpful to have this as a checklist to say, have you distributed this podcast to all platforms so we don't stop halfway through? One thing about this stage here, and when you set up your own automation, you might personalize or customize the process for you. But this distributed to platforms is not to be confused with actually releasing the episode. But this step is basically just to make sure you've edited the full video and audio. They've been uploaded to the particular platform, and we haven't yet set a date to release it. That's the next step. So we're going to scroll on over. So in my process, the calendar that I use automatically triggers the corresponding communication that lets someone know, hey, your episode is slotted to release. Be on the lookout for your episode. Here are the marketing materials. Check it out. You can check out the episode, kind of like a pre-release, to make sure that they're okay with your edits. That is what this step is for. If you've had like 4 or 5 different batch recorded episodes, you can now use this calendar to book them as like a slotted release. They'll get triggered emails to let them know that the episode is coming up, and then you don't have to worry about anything else from there. Okay, so this next stage here is my secret sauce. For folks who like to release their podcast just out in the ether and no one ever knows that it actually existed, that's a problem, especially if you have a guest episode. So what this stage allows you to do is trigger an email that will ask your guest to go live with you. Whether you trigger it the week that it releases or you trigger it weeks in advance, the email essentially, and you can tailor your communication. You can tailor your own wording, but the email says, let's go live to promote your episode. This is not necessarily sent as a question. It's more of like, hey, let's do this. I'm excited. You should be excited. Let's get everybody involved. You should be able to send them links so that they can send it to their audience ahead of time. Really get a lot of buzz around your episode launching. So that promotional live, whether it happens before you release the episode or after or on the day of, that is a specific conversation that you should have with your guests before you forget about the episode. The next stage here, as it is in my workflow, is to release the episode. So we trigger the promotional email first, then we release the episode. After that, we have the actual live. So for my workflow, I like to go live on the day that the episode releases. So for me, I have this last stage here to say whether they did a show or a no show. Just because someone says that they'll go live with you doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be free on the day that you want to go live. So it's really important that you stay on top of them. Make sure you have your system set up to just remind them that we have set up this time, and even send a calendar appointment. This promotional live stage here allows them to book the time so that it goes on their calendar, so that we're not leaving anything up to chance. So that takes you literally from the moment you upload the raw file all the way to the moment that it's released. And one thing that I failed to mention is not only are emails sent between you and your guest, but also you're getting admin communication throughout the entire part. So it doesn't stop here at the edit completed stage. No, if you have a team member, a virtual assistant or assistant, or if you have a social media team specifically, you can set people up as unique receivers for these notifications along the path. Everyone can get the notification, or a specific person can get the notification. As long as you make sure that the communication is heavily represented in your system, you don't have to worry about under communication or manually communicating in person in real life. So I'll go ahead and zoom out so you can see the full workflow. So basically, this is how you plan out your guest experience. And at each stage, which would be the blue boxes that you see here on this page, at each stage, you can customize the experience that you want to offer. Not only the communication, but also how do you want them to show up? Do you want them to wear certain things? Do you want your experience when they arrive on set to be a certain way? Think through all of that and be mindful that you want to think through folks who reach out to you and folks you reach out to. Because once you start to mix and mingle the different guest experiences, then you will find yourself telling people that want to be on your podcast, sure, when you really don't want to. They haven't been vetted and you don't know what they're about, and that runs a bunch of risks down the line. So before we move into what I think is the most, like, the easiest part for you to just put all of this into application, we are going to work through the second phase, which is your special guest workflow, for example. So stay tuned. We're going to get into practical examples of how you can set up your pipeline. So stick around. So I'm going to zoom in here so we can see what is going on the right side of this screen here. So I have a couple notes here, a couple tips that you can actually use in your own research process. So if you want to research your guests, first of all, it starts with you having a criteria. I've said that many, many times on this channel, but if you don't have a guest criteria, you want to go ahead and write out 3 or 4 things that really signifies how can this guest bring my audience value. Now, a tool that you can use. If you don't know what a Boolean code is, you need to search Boolean code. I'm sure you can find information all over YouTube on what is a Boolean code. I don't have a video yet, but if that's something that you're interested in, I can create one for you. But you can use a Boolean code to find potential guests on all social media platforms. It's not just Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram, but you can do Pinterest. You can do all of the Twitch, all of these different places where people exist. You can use a Boolean code, which is basically like a Google search, a customized Google search that will find individual profiles that fit your criteria. You're going to use your guest criteria to scrape those potential guests. And when I say scrape, you're going to have a bunch of lists. You're going to have a huge list of a bunch of people. Scraping is going into each and every person and identifying who do I want to be a guest on my podcast. And then the last one, which is going to be system related, you want to add a tag into your system to let you know these are the people that, of all the folks I've researched, these are the people I've identified as a potential guest. Now, these are just quick tips for you to actually use in your process when you have your own system set up. So let's go ahead and get to the next step. Now, you've researched your guests. You know you want them to be on your podcast. Now it's time for you to contact the potential guest. This is an outbound communication. It's less of an inbound, so the relationship is different. So if you think about the tone, if someone is knocking on your door, let's say it could be a telemarketer, it could be your friend. You don't actually know. So you're going to greet them with a general tone to make sure whoever's on the other side of that door is cool with you. But if you reach out to someone, let's say it's Beyonce, you are absolutely going to pull out the red carpet from the beginning of your communication to, 1, be considerate of their time, 2, be considerate of the relationship you guys have or don't have, and then 3, usher them into your podcast process to make it feel like you're about to have a really dope podcast conversation. So as you can see, I narrowed down the communication to 2 different channels, whether it's going to be DM, direct message on your social media, or email communication. This is going to be the easiest way for you to automate outbound communication, and it's also the place where most people frequently check their messages. When it comes to outbound outreach for your podcast, you don't want to send someone a text message who they have not given you their information. Even if you can find their text message information online, chances are if you text someone to ask them to be on your podcast before they actually gave you their information, they're likely to just like block your email and just block your text message and just go on about their business. So you want to be very considerate about how you reach out to these people and then how you got their information. Don't go about it in a shady way. Do your best to be on the up and up and reach out to them in a respectful way that they want to be reached out to. So we'll scroll down just a little bit. These yellow circles, these yellow blocks basically let you know that there's a workflow tied to either one, whether you initiate a DM outbound outreach message or you initiate an email outbound outreach method. Both of the workflows are going to capture when they agree. And by agreeing, that means that they sent you an affirmative message. So they said, sure, I'm interested, or something to the effect. Now your system can actually pick up whether they sent a positive message or if they didn't respond at all, or if they sent a negative message. All right. So if they agree to be on your podcast, you now want to send them an official invitation. Now I'm going to record a separate video to show you, 1, the words that you should use to invite this guest, but also how to specifically automate this part of your podcast. So you want to send them an official invitation, which outlines why you chose them to be on the podcast. And then in that invitation process, you're going to send them a special guest questionnaire. This is not to be confused with your guest appearance questionnaire. These questions are completely different. Why? Because the relationship is different. So you want to ask them questions on the special guest questionnaire that basically solidifies the important information that you need on the podcast. Like, do they want to promote? What are the links to the things that they want to promote? That kind of thing. On your guest appearance questionnaire, there are more vetting questions to make sure their platform aligns to yours. In this case, you've already done your research, so you don't want to ask Beyonce, how is she going to add value to your platform? You should already have an idea. So let's move on to the next one. The next one is where our paths align. So remember when we said we have to have a specific calendar for the special guest as well as the guest? Cool. So after you spend the special guest questionnaire, this is where your paths collide. However, you're not going to send the exact same interview calendar for folks who are special guests as the ones who are a regular guest. Why? Because the triggers are all based off of your initial calendar. So you want to make sure that the special guest calendar is tied to special communication, and then your guest calendar is tied to special guest communication. As you can see, when it comes to reminders, when it comes to information leading up to your podcast, everything else is the exact same in the process. So you'll want to just think through, how do I want my guest experience to look, whether they are a guest or a special guest. All right, now that wraps up how you should plan your podcast if you want to have a guest from start to finish. Now, this next session is going to be how you actually set up your pipeline, no matter what system that you're using, but especially if you're using the podcast machine. All right, let's get into it. So in the same Miro board, we're just going to scroll on down to your pipelines. And as you can see, there are 4 major pipelines. There's your interview pipeline, post-production pipeline, there's your episode launch pipeline, and then there's your promotion pipeline. Each one plays a specific role. So the interview pipeline is the longest pipeline because this is where someone goes from a potential guest to actually interviewing the guest. Whether they started as a research guest or they started as someone who was interested and they knocked on your door, they have gone through the survey being submitted process if they were reaching out to you. If you've actually thought that they are a great fit, you're going to move them over to your guest invited stage in your pipeline. After guests being invited, they should book their own interview. That is why they are sent the calendar link. After they book their interview, they're moved to interview date booked. And whether they show up or don't, if they do not show up, they're going to be in this no-show stage. If you have the interview, then they're in this interview conducted phase until you upload the raw file. The next pipeline that's really important is going to be your post-production pipeline. This is everything that happens after you record the podcast. You're going to upload your file, which means a stage here needs to be created for the raw file being uploaded. The episode needs to begin editing, and after it's edited, then you have a stage here for edit complete. Once the edit is complete, SEO research is completed, and then you upload your podcast, both audio and video, depending on your setup, to their respective platforms. The launch date pipeline should be set up with 2 specific steps: the release date being set and the episode being released. In between that, there's not much variability other than them being invited for the promotional live, which I actually should add here as a 3rd step. The last step in the process is your promotional pipeline, which is actually where the promo live goes. Whether it's a pre or post promotional live, you need to set that date. So once that date has been set, whether it's on your end or on your guest's end, that stage will show up here. If they do not show up to the live, then they'll show up here, which automatically triggers no-show communication. So anywhere you see in this pipeline where it says no-show, the communication is soft but yet firm. Are you okay checking in? We had an interview right now. Are you okay checking in? We scheduled a live. Do you need to push it back? So it's schedule friendly language, but it's also very firm to let them know, get your butt on this call, or you should be here right now. So they will already respond back to you. Oh my God, I'm sorry, if they are not somewhere in a car accident, or you get my point. The last part here is cut clips after the live. So, of course, in your post production process, you want to grab clips from the actual episode. But when you go live, you also want to cut clips from that live so you can also promote that information. You don't want to let your podcast go unnoticed. So these steps definitely ensure that you get the most eyeballs as possible within the first month of releasing that episode. Okay, so that is your pipeline setup from start to finish. In any system, depending on whether it's Go High Level or if it's Trello, you can set up your pipeline to look just like this, and you can automate it in the exact ways that I'm talking about. Now, in another video, I am going to walk you through specifically how to set up an automation, starting with the invitation process, so just stay tuned. But if you have any questions on how can you set up this pipeline for your podcast, then just drop it in the comments below. If you want to get connected and you want me to just do this for you on your podcast, then reach out to me at Ariel Young _ on Instagram, or just click the link below so we can get started. This is all about saving you time and energy on the podcast. So even though it looks like a lot right now, if you think through the process in the beginning, you don't have to worry about it in the process, and your podcast will be way more sustainable. Okay? Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Until next time, peace out.